Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and we'll start a whole new series here based on your suggestions. Great suggestions on this part, and I wanted to go ahead and start early because some of these had some really good information to share with everyone as opposed to waiting towards the late weekend. This one I selected because it was another perfect example of that tragic thing where there it was, a real life cryptid, and if you go by the basis, real evidence of it, and it's perfectly preserved, just staying there, standing still because it was dead. And if but for the fact somebody would have actually taken it and kept it and further preserved it, and let's say was able to place it somewhere where people can view it going forward, it would have been a beautiful example of a real life cryptid, a one of a kind that the world would have been able to see. But alas, people did not do that, and I'll explain what happened eventually to it and how all the evidence was lost. It reminded me of one of the more recent ones that I talked about. I believe it was the Con Rit, which was another example of a cryptid that nobody kept any evidence on, even though there was a perfect opportunity. And the one that I'm talking about here that I'll share this time around is a cryptid that goes by the name or the nickname of Gambo, which we're looking at a picture of here. And there's very, very fascinating stuff with regards to this cryptid because of the way it was found and the way the evidence, or at least the only loose evidence, was collected. And then I'll finally share again what happened to the actual cryptid itself and how it's almost tragic in terms of its lost presence. So now Gambo was discovered sometime in June 12th, 1983. So you have to go back in time, not too far, but just a couple of decades. And the reason why it was given the nickname Gambo was because the person that found it there found it at a place called the Bungalow Beach there in a region of Africa called the Gambia. So maybe that's why it was called Gambo, because where it was located, that's where it kind of rhymes off of the name the Gambia. But who knows? The person that found it, though, was actually a kid, a 15-year-old by the name of Owen Burnham. And he stated that one early morning, again on June 12, 1983, he was traveling with his family. I don't know exactly if they were, let's say, going on a sightseeing tour or if they were just exploring the regions where they were staying, but the way he was described, this kid Owen, as a wildlife enthusiast, sure made it seem like they were yet on another voyage or a trek of some sort through those jungles or through that beach area. But the way he described it was on that morning, him and his family, they came across this very strange looking thing that happened to be beached there on, I guess it was the sand or the dirt that was near the water. This guy Owen, again, he was a wildlife enthusiast, so he decided he wanted to go ahead and take as much measurements and as much details as possible. Here's the curious part, and this is the thing that kind of raises my eyebrow when it comes to the authenticity of this. Apparently, nobody within the family had any kind of camera with them. This is 1983. Even back then, I think people still had some ease when it came to getting cameras. I mean, we've all seen pictures from parents and grandparents where they've taken family photos from the 60s, from the 70s, from the 80s. So cameras were pretty prevalent. And the fact that this family was presumably going through some kind of trek, you would think that they would have some kind of camera with them to capture those moments throughout the trek. But again, they did not. So if that raises your eyebrows too, it sure did mine. So even though that did not happen as far as the camera, at least we have some evidence, because the kid Owen decided he wanted to make some sketches of the creature that was found. He did a very, I guess, a pretty good, accurate looking description of the actual thing, whatever this Gambo is. And the way he described it was, he talked to some of the local villagers there, and they thought that they told him that it was actually a dolphin of some sort. But he saw that it was something else completely different when he tried to later cross-reference what he drew and what he measured with any known living thing. But there he was, right next to this beach thing, this Gambo, and his family, I guess they allowed him enough time for him to do not just a set of illustrations, but to take some really specific measurements. And here's what I mean. Later on, whenever this tension of this Gambo and how Owen found him came across a cryptozoologist by the name of Carl Schucker, Carl eventually decided to seek more information on the carcass, and he was able to get a boatload of the information from Owen himself, because Owen again was able to take very clear measurements, and this is what he described, and this is again straight from the 15-year-old Owen. He told Carl that this Gambo thing showed little to no signs of decomposition, so it must have been recently beached or recently dead of some sort, and that the way the measurements were taken, it was about 15 feet in length, so by no means not a tiny little thing. The coloration on top of the Gambo was brown on top, but it had a distinct white belly or distinct white bottom. Let's say much like some of the sea life, where like a great white shark, where it has a gray top but then a distinct white bottom. That's how this particular creature had. The skin itself was pretty smooth. No doubt it was something along those lines of, let's say, as smooth as a dolphin, anything like that. The actual measurements that the kid Owen took, he described as follows. The head was quite large. It was 4.5 feet in length, which is almost as tall as some people, for example. It had a beak that alone measured about 2.5 feet, and then it had anything involving some teeth, what were described as conical teeth, and he apparently counted 80 of them within the mouth itself. There was just a small, tiny pair of nostrils that were on top of the beak, which I would imagine like resembled any of the nostrils that most sea life has, those that have to come up for air. And then the head itself was a little bit domed. In fact, the dome part measured about 10 inches tall, and its eyes were little tiny, parted more towards the sides of the faces rather than facing forward. And then its flippers, he measured them as well. They measured about 1.5 feet long on each end, and we're talking about the front ones, and because apparently Gambo also had rear flippers, but they were so, I don't know if they were so torn off or damaged in some sort. Maybe they were torn off by other animals that were trying to eat or scavenge this thing, but they were so badly damaged that they were not able to be measured. In fact, he noted, this kid Owen, that he saw some intestines hanging off some of the rear flippers, notating again that perhaps there was some animal that was scavenging on it. And then that was it. He did not see any kind of other distinct like sea mammal markings, like let's say a fin on top of it, or nothing like a normal tail where it's more like a flipper. Instead, the tail that he saw was long and pointed, and it measured about 5 feet in length. So overall, again, a very accurate description from a 15-year-old kid. I question that too just a little bit. He may have been really interested in catching all the details possible, who knows, but I don't think there's too many 15-year-old kids that would do something like that. So again, take that with a little grain of salt. But yes, that's at least everything that's tied to Gambo, because that's the only evidence that comes from Owen Burnham. And then finally, here's what happened to this carcass. Again, the tragedy of it is, if it was there and it was truly real and it was discovered and it was to have been kept preserved, then my goodness, we would have one of the missing links. We would have, like, let's say, one of the best proofs of cryptids out there in this world to share to this day. But alas, that did not happen, because Owen later stated that once the local villagers took over the carcass, they actually decapitated it and then they were able to take the head and find another tourist, someone who was, let's say, interested in collecting this thing, and they were able to actually sell the Gambo head to that tourist. And if you're wondering, okay, that just leaves the rest of the body, at least to show some kind of evidence. Unfortunately, the villagers decided to actually to burn the rest of the entire body, so there's no, let's say, portions of skin left, or no portions of bones or any kind of other kinds of organs. Nope. Instead, the entire body was burned, and then on top of that, the body itself was buried altogether. So clearly all the evidence is gone. Where it was actually buried, that's the curious thing too, because afterwards there have been a little bit of a hunt of some sort. There was a cryptozoologist, there was an expedition. I don't know if it was led by a cryptozoologist or not, but it certainly seemed like it, back in 2006. And this particular expedition tried to go to that area, the Gambia, to try to find the remains of the creature. No doubt that they were asking some of the local villagers, who were pointing them into some of the alleged burial sites, but alas, they could not find it. In fact, only thing they learned was that some of the villagers were telling them that the carcass, at least to them, they still thought that it was along the lines of a dolphin, as I mentioned very early on in the video. And then as far as any other attempts to try to locate it, I don't know, but that's about it. If it is out there, and if it is truly buried somewhere, then there is still the chance that one of the best crypto evidence possible could still be found and then shared with this world. But up until that point, when that happens, all we have now is just some very loose evidence that was gathered by the 15-year-old here. It could be true, it could be false. I mentioned, in fact, that it could be false because some others have also expressed doubt that anything involving this carcass was real, mainly because, again, as I was mentioning, there's no photographs of this particular creature, but also because one would think that if they came across something that was this spectacular, refined, that there was no sample taken of any kind, even a tiny sample. I mean, clipping off a wing, flipper, or clipping off a portion of, let's say, the beak or anything like that. The fact that was not taken, which when it should be pretty obvious behavior, is also something that creates serious doubt. As far as what this creature, this Gambo, could have actually truly been, there's been some speculation. There was a cryptozoologist by the name of Chris Orick, and he proposed that it's actually a variation of a real-life creature here on Earth called the Shepards beaked whale, which you're looking at a picture of here. It does look pretty close to this particular creature, but the difference is that there's I think it was a dorsal fin that's tied to this shepherd's beak whale, while this Gambo did not have one. But he states that it could have been torn off, or it could have been twisted in some manner that it just didn't line up in a specific manner. This shepherd's beak whale, if it truly was that, kind of makes sense, because not only does it look like it, but it's also very rare. Just doing a cursory glance, apparently there's only been about 42 sightings in the entire world of this particular real-life creature, the shepherd's beak whale. So it is definitely something on the rarer side, and who knows, maybe one of those shepherd's beaked whales separated from the pack and then somehow ended up in the Gambia and was able, I guess, to get beached, and that's how it was found later on by that kid. I'm thinking more along the lines that it could be that, but finally others also state that it could be a long lost dinosaur of some sort, like a plesiosaur. In fact, somebody, I think it was another cryptozoologist, mentioned and referred to it as perhaps being the last of the mosasaurs. The mosasaurs, of course, being a very popular form of dinosaur, and so there's a chance that could happen as well. Or at the end, it could just be just a one-off, just its own special, unique, original cryptid, and that was the last of its kind, to the way it was found, the way it was discovered. There's no more of them out there. So what do you guys think? The Gambo, the last chance of having something as of true evidence, of really good evidence presented, but alas, nobody was able to take that evidence and preserve it. So pretty tragic when one thinks about it. If anyone knows any more information about this Gambo, that'd be fascinating to hear. If anyone has been in that area, particularly the Gambia, and would like to share like more information about the locals, how they thought about this creature, and if they've seen any others, it's a long shot. But if anyone has that info and they'd like to share it, that would be interesting too. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.